Welcome to This Podcast is Making Me Thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This episode 120. You know, today's guest from her many appearances on all your favorite shows, including Modern Family, Judging Amy, Will and Grace, and Home Improvement. And of course, she was Jerry's girlfriend, Donna, in the season 2 episode of Seinfeld, The Phone Message. Please welcome Gretchen German. Gretchen, thanks for joining.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, Gretchen, take us back. February 13th, 1991, The Phone Message aired on NBC. You filmed it in December of 90. So, yeah,
I'm impressed you know the stuff. Okay.
Just a few years back. So, there's a lot of history on this episode. And we talked before, we rank it number one of all time, which is rare.
It is.
We'll dig a little bit into that, but
okay. I have some opinions on that too.
Yeah, sure. So tell us a little bit how the role of Donna came about. We all love Donna, how Donna came about, the whole audition process. What do you remember?
I remember very little. I know the casting directors, Mark Hirschfeld and Meg Lieberman. Mark had become kind of a friend of mine, and he had me in, and the show had only aired like 4 or 5 episodes. It was that little summer season, right?
Yep.
And nobody knew about the show. I'd never seen it. But there was a buzz. And I remember my agents being super excited because they had heard that the show was going to be something, you know? And that's all I really remember about the whole casting process. It was, I didn't read with Jerry or anything interesting. I just met them all on the set.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And we were looking into a little bit of the history of this show. There could be a reason for that. I'm not sure how much of this you were privy to, but there was another episode that was supposed to air. Yeah.
That's right. It was last minute.
Yes. Your episode was kind of thrown together last minute, and it kind of screwed the scheduling up a bit, I think, from what we gathered. So do you remember anything about that?
There was another one they were going to do, and they just nixed the whole script.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. They might have even shot some of it. Yeah. And then they had to nix the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was a Larry Charles episode in reference to a gun, and so it didn't play. The Sharonis, Jason Alexander, Julia, they all kind of didn't think it was funny. So they literally, Larry David put together The Phone Message in 2 days.
Okay, that actually explains some stuff to me too. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so you might not have been privy to that. They probably just started The Phone Message with because your table read. I don't know if you remember the table read, but it was off schedule from what we gathered as well. It was on a Friday. Usually they're on Wednesdays. I don't know if everything else was rushed or if you felt rushed or anything like that.
I don't remember, but I will tell you that one thing that was kind of interesting is I'd done guest things on other shows, and I've done many since then, and the truth is they kind of don't care about the guest actor. You're there to serve the piece. You go, you do your thing, you leave. But this one was a little different. And when it got to where, when we were rehearsing the bit on the sofa, and we're snuggling on the sofa, talking about cotton dockers. And Larry David came in. And he sat over, by the cereal in the kitchen, Oh, wait, you're right. It's behind you. And he sat over there, and he kept throwing out lines to us, which we would kind of tweak and try things. And he actually kept saying, Gretchen, is it funny? Do you think it's funny? And I'm like, yeah, that's funny, which no one ever asked the guest actor's opinion, but he did. And maybe that's it. Maybe they were really kind of writing on the fly.
Yeah. And that scene you're referring to, we love that scene. As we said, it's our number one episode. And really, the chemistry between you and Jerry, and just you're snuggling with them there, and everything's going great. And then boom, the cotton dockers come up, and he just can't let it go. And you're really trying to let it go and get back into it. And we just love how it switches from in the mood to just not in the mood real quick like that.
I read something somewhere. It was either one of those Seinfeldia websites or books or something that said, and I don't know, you guys would know this, but that my episode was, they call it the first of Jerry's capricious dumpings. And I always thought that it was kind of interesting the way that Larry David was throwing out things that it almost felt like they were trying to decide, would he really dump her because she liked commercials, you know? And they decided that yes, he would. But I feel like it kind of informed the rest of the series, you know, and his reaction to women and his pickiness about things, and so, you know, it was the beginning of something.
Yeah,
very well said. And that theme that you just mentioned is why we rank it so high. I mean,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you talk to a lot of fanatics like, oh, well, there wasn't a lot of Kramer in it, there wasn't a lot of Elaine in it, but yeah, that's okay. Like they played their parts.
And the George bit was brilliant.
Unbelievable. Great. And then talking about setting up characters, I mean, yeah, and that sets up George. That personifies George, that whole storyline.
What was that line they say where it's like they were warning each other that the girl was coming back?
Tippy toe?
That's tippy toe.
But it's the core of the show is Jerry and George and their friendship. Like at its core, and that did it better than anything, right? Like them talking about the date and the apple, and they both have a date on the Saturday night. Like, I mean, that's what the show's about, you know. And they had a kooky neighbor, they had an ex-girlfriend, sure, but they weren't, you know, in our mind, supposed to be the anchor of the show, right?
Yeah, interesting.
So, and again, to your point, a lot of common themes were planted, but also really elevated during the show, like the Jerry thing, obviously. But actually, I don't think he
would go.
Yeah, but I don't think Jerry dumped you. I think you dumped Jerry, if I recall.
Yeah, because we were trying it again. You know, and then he told everyone about my love of the commercial.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody gets that nowadays, because those commercials aren't. It kind of doesn't matter, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, commercials were a big thing back then. They're not as big now because we have all the DVRs and Netflix and everything. But yeah, to your point, so that second scene when you're trying to kind of rekindle it, and then, you know, George blows, and then Kramer really blows it in Kramer fashion. You know, cotton dockers. You know, he says one line. But what do you remember about you know, working with Jason and Michael? You know, in those scenes, or maybe throughout the week.
Jason was wonderful. And again, remember, it was still really early on, and the show wasn't a big hit yet. So we just hung out. He took me out to lunch. We hung out. And the other girl that played his girlfriend, you know, we all kind of hung out together. He was the one who was the most social with the guest stars. You know, he was a nice guy. And over the years after that, I'd run into him a few times, and he was always really nice, really sweet. I had very little to do with Michael Richards except just rehearsing. And I remember hanging out backstage with him before, because he was back there waiting to go on after I went on first, and we had the scenes, and then he came in. And so he was kind of hanging out there. And, you know, those guys are always a little awkward with me. It's often, you know, the girl guest star, no one knows how to behave with her. Jerry was a little shy too. He was pretty shy, I have to say. You know, the whole snuggling on the sofa thing definitely got him all fatutzed and everything. And you know, he wasn't at that time really an actor. He was a stand-up, and he hadn't done that much acting. So I think he was still a little shy.
Yeah, you could kind of sense the nervousness there. Yeah. What was he drinking? An orange juice? Like you offered to come back to his apartment. He whips out the orange juice. Yeah.
But I remember all of that being a choice also. Like, he and Larry David had talked about what would he be drinking? What would they be, you know? So.
Well, what's interesting is, and then you fast forward to when you came back in the second scene, and he had the white wine out. Maybe that was like some sort of, you know, I don't know, to relax you a little bit.
Stepping up the relationship.
But it's just you have such an. You mentioned it was so early on. It was actually only the 9th episode.
that right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it did 13 million, right? Compared to awful episodes like The Frogger doing 35 million, which, but again, listen, Wednesday night early on is what it is. But
Yeah.
you had such a unique perspective, right? And listen, you did 227, one of my favorite shows. You were,
I think that was my first job.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, Gretchen. I always like saying, man, what's her name? Jack A. always did the. Anyway,
and what's her name? The Regina.
Yeah, from the Jeffersons, right?
She played the little girl.
Oh, the little girl. Yes. Now she's
a huge director and a star.
Yeah. So listen, you've worked with so many greats at that early stage, but Seinfeld, 9th episode, like you said it, they were kind of just, Larry was kind of like trying to tell jokes. Gretchen, does this work? Like, did you have a sense after you left that show, like, wow, this was something special, or wow, this is just another sitcom I was on?
No, it was definitely cool. There was a cachet to having done it, and it was Chironis that directed, right? And he was kind of cool. There was just, like I said, there was a vibe about it, and in the business, they kind of thought, "Oh, yeah, this is going to do well," but no one was watching it yet. So,
right, yeah, it's interesting, and that's where our kind of love comes from, because we were watching it, and it was one of those things where, as it got bigger and bigger, more people were watching, but it changed, and that's why we cherish the early seasons. You mentioned Jerry, how and it's evident, he talks about it too. This was early on, 9th episode, 2nd season. He's not an actor, right? He's just kind of getting. And in this episode, a lot of his dialogue with you is really just him telling jokes. He tells a lactose intolerant joke. Says he never saw I Love Lucy.
Which
Scottish
says
Irish.
something about like a guy who doesn't know how to deal with women, so he just kind of makes. It was also, if you remember those first episodes, they still had that little stand-up bit.
Yeah, there was a middle bit. Yeah, middle stand-up bit in this one.
Right,
yeah. So there was a lot of those jokes. Yeah. I'm curious how much kind of fun that was. The car scene. He's like, Irish, Scottish. What's the different lassie? He uses his Irish like all that kind of. He's being himself, probably, right? That's probably how we picked up girls back then. As a comedian, trying to be funny, telling jokes. Yeah. I'm curious. You said like Larry was throwing lines during the couch scene and stuff. Was there any type of, were those all written as they were and they were first takes, or was he trying different bits, different jokes? Was it more of like, or was
they
it more
were trying all
the
sorts of things.
Yeah,
they were definitely playing around with it. Yeah, and like you said, I think we had kind of a funny chemistry because he was so awkward, and I feel like I was kind of enjoying his awkwardness a little bit, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah, you definitely played off him very well as far as, on the couch, the smiling, the laughing. It's all believable, and which makes the turn even better, because then it gets really blue. Because you could see you're just like, he's not letting this go. He's not letting the Dockers go. And then it becomes, all right, I'm going to have to argue about this and state my case. And, it just plays really well for a relationship. And, I don't know, like early on in your career, were you used to that sort of, I guess, back and forth and kind of change in a character? Usually guest stars, like you said, are just coming in and, doing their thing, but you had a much bigger role in the scene,
Sometimes, somebody will come in with a script at the last minute and they changed everything, but there's not usually a lot of exploration. It's usually, they just tell you what to do and you do it. And you're kind of at the mercy of these things. But it's funny, when I watch myself now on Seinfeld, which I have to say I don't do a lot. It's not like I'm sitting around watching myself on Seinfeld, but the only thing I can see in it is my hair, which I know is ridiculous, but at that time I was wearing my hair. It was long and curly, and I would wear it up in this clip on my head. Like I did several episodes of a show called Wings, like that same year, and I had that same hairstyle with it. And it's the same way that Julia Louis-Dreyfus wore her hair for that season. Remember, she wore it up in a clip and it was all curly?
Yeah.
So they decided that I could not have the same hair as Elaine. I don't know if they thought they would get us confused or something, because not much alike, but so they blew my hair out straight. So all I can look at is just this massive mane of hair. And I don't know if it looks as silly to everyone else, but to me, I'm like, oh, it's not really what I looked like. But anyway, it's funny. You look at yourself and yeah, you only see the kind of oddities or things you're, not sure about.
Yeah, I remember watching it live, and I remember kind of siding with Jerry. I'm like, this was. But as I'm mature and older, Gretchen, I'm like, I was taking your side on this. Like, I know guys like that. They're having fun, and he wouldn't let it go, and he was just, I don't know, he was being annoying. But I side with you.
Thank you.
Forward. But I guess, did you ever? What's your take on the Cotton Dockers commercial or commercials like that?
Oh, I do. I remember those commercials, and they're completely ridiculous. I think I side with Jerry. Actually, they're kind of stupid commercials, but oh well.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the kind of the writing on the fly process that you brought up with Larry David. I mean. Take us through. I mean, that's during rehearsals, right? I'm assuming when he was doing some of that stuff where he was kind of throwing you those lines, is this funny, that sort of thing. What like, how much was sort of, I guess, changed by the time you actually shot, or not specifically, but more, I guess, tonally? Were you wondering, like, this is not like any other show I've been on? I know at the time you may have had a few under your belt, or since then you were in a lot. Right. So looking back, were you like, holy cow, how did these guys like throw this thing together? Like, was Larry David like just a gene? Like, what was it doesn't sound like a normal process of putting together a sitcom,
But it's interesting because you guys talking about, or kind of reminding me about the fact that it was a replacement. And I mean, I kind of remember that, but I only remember it being maybe a day shorter than usual. It wasn't like it was, we threw it together in like 2 days. That I remember there was a full rehearsal schedule. But maybe, like you said, the table read was on a different day. But definitely the rehearsal process was different because, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a writer come down and just sit there on the set with us. And I don't even remember Chironis being there during that time. Like, I think Larry came in and just kind of, they were tweaking things. And it wasn't until, at the end of the day, you do like a run through for the suits, and that it really came together.
Yeah, I mean, for the baseball historians out there, it's kind of like the old Wally Pipp. If you don't know who Wally Pipp is, he got hurt. Lou Gehrig stepped in, and the rest was history. The guy never missed a game, one of the greatest ever. So what I'm saying is, this episode's similar to that, right? Stepped in our minds as number one of all time. Right. So we talked a little off the air about where it ranked, and you said, well, what do you think? Because you sound like a fan of the show. Obviously, early on, you didn't watch much, but now that you've seen all 9 seasons, where do you think the phone message kind of belongs? And have we swayed you at all?
I doubt I've seen every episode, just saying, like you guys have, but I always thought it was a solid episode. I enjoy it. I liked it, but no one knows it. No one recognizes it really. Like, there's certain Seinfeld episodes that the soup Nazi or whatever, everybody, oh yeah, that one. But if I say I'm in the one where I like the Cotton Dockers commercials, they'll kind of go, hey, I don't know. People don't remember it. And maybe it's because it's early on, or maybe just because, I mean, it's not, doesn't make lists, so it's not hyped. But I think it was a funny episode. And like we were saying, I think the fact that it informed both Jerry and George's, like the rest of the entire series, kind of makes it maybe a little bit important.
Yeah. I mean, for our money, like we said, it is George in a nutshell. I mean, coffee's not coffee. Coffee's sex. Like eating an apple. What'd you call me? Did you call me a wuss? I mean, it's George and Jerry. I mean, it's the show. I mean, that like to us, that's Seinfeld. I mean, you want to throw in, soup Nazis and yada yadas. I mean, those are catchphrases for the masses, but
Tippy
for the
Toe's a
fans,
great phrase,
tippy toe, lemon tree.
right?
We start almost every podcast with tippy toe, lemon tree.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's one of the greatest lines of all time. I mean, that sort of thing. Like, I mean, so what kind of interaction did you have with? I think it's Tori Pallone played George's girlfriend, and all those kind of scenes. Were you on set for like shooting of those and things like that, or?
I don't remember. No, I would have been backstage getting ready and people futzing with my hair and blowing it down. But I mean, we hung out just lunch and that kind of thing, But it's funny because I don't think she worked much after that. I mean, I actually think she quit the business. I think it was because she was great in the episode, and I would think, you know what I mean? I think she wasn't as into the whole acting world. I don't know what became of her really. She probably got a real career where she, was successful, but I don't know. Yeah. She was nice. I remember Jerry was obsessing over this watch that he wanted. He had to have a certain watch. And during breaks and rehearsals, he kept going on about the watch and telling us about the watch. Finally, we were like, just go get the watch, Jerry. And he did. And he came back, and I remember she was super into the watch too. And I was kind of, it's a watch. I don't know. But anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you had your career has gone on obviously a lot since then. We brought up some of the ones in your credits, but I mean, just a ton of, of shows that we all remember and love, and a lot of big names in those shows, right? I mean, obviously your Will and Grace's, your Home Improvements, Modern Family. I mean, so I know we kind of touched on it, but like when you're on those shows, is it like, is it to you like, okay, comparing it to Seinfeld? I know Seinfeld you were on a while ago, and it was early Seinfeld, but having a Larry David on set, you're not getting that on these other shows, no matter how great they are, right? As far as like the showrunner goes and being that involved in a show, I mean, it's got to be, an experience that you've kind of learned from and took with you on your other endeavors, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, the standard format for these things is you get the script, you do the table read, then you break it down, you do rehearsals at the end of the day, you do a run through, and then back in those days, you'd get a delivery. Someone would messenger over new pages, like a new script, at some point at night. Now, of course, it would come through the computer, but in those days, there was no such thing. And I remember you get the from the door, you go through and see what they changed in your parts, but you didn't have any interaction with the writers. I mean, they would be on set for the table read and the run through, but that was pretty much it. I don't, like I said, I don't think I ever had a writer come down and sit on the set and work with us. So it was kind of unique, definitely.
Interesting. And I'm sure Angela Lansbury was a lot like Larry David, right?
Angela Lansbury was the loveliest woman. Yes. Just really just what you'd imagine. And there was the thing on Murder, She Wrote. I was the murderer, by the way. That was, I got to have that scene where she confronts me, and it was me. But that if you ever got lucky enough to get a 2-shot with Angela, which I was in a couple, they had the special Angela filter on the camera. So you were all beautiful. So that was kind of fun. I'm like, why do I look so good in some of these shots? It was the Angela filter.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's funny. We've spoken to over 70 guest stars, and I feel like 35% of them have been on Murder, She Wrote.
I'd say 65% of them, at least.
It ran forever and ever. It ran forever. And you didn't even have to audition for it. The casting director would give Angela like 3 reels and said, pick from, and she just chose people. It was very nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's funny.
That's a nice little tidbit. Tell us about you recently shot a pilot, right? Bad Therapist.
No good. Hasn't happened yet.
It's still in the works. So, even better.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's in pre-production, so we'll see.
And it's funny, we've like I said, we saw so many guest stars, and like, Seinfeld changed my life because I was so recognizable. And actually, some others are like, well, kind of pigeonhole me, blah, blah, blah. But like you mentioned, again, only 13 million watched that episode, which, by the way, was more than people watching Game of Thrones. So
that's funny.
Keep it in perspective.
Yeah, right.
But I guess did it change you? I mean, you say Cotton Dockers. I think when people think of that episode, they probably think Cotton Dockers versus the phone message. It's kind of a weird title, you know, or they could have called it Tippy Toe. But I'm just curious kind of how that kind of just changed things for you. I know it wasn't Thursday night Seinfeld, but
I have to say, it became iconic very quickly. Within 3 years, it was like, oh, you just Seinfeld? What was it? And I never saw that one. Oh, it was early, you know, that kind of thing. But it was a little cred that you were on one. And I, for years, had a little snippet of it at the very end of my demo reel. Like there would be things that were current, and then at the end there would be this little, like the Easter egg if you got to the end. You know what I mean? and it would just be a little bit of Seinfeld, and people always went, oh, it's Seinfeld, you know. So that was kind of fun. You know, over the years, when people hear things you've done, there aren't that many things that people kind of freak out over, but Seinfeld's definitely one of them. I did an episode of a Star Trek, and people get freaked out over that also.
Yeah,
it's, you know, it's a thing, and people are. I still get weird fan mail from people like peculiar, Trekkies that are super into it. But there's something about the Seinfeld world that, you know, it's also, I found that when I was a little girl, I remember watching I Love Lucy. That was a vintage comedy. And I remember thinking it was so funny, and it was kind of cool because it was before I was born, but I was into it and I'd memorized Lucy episodes. It's the same thing with Seinfeld now with little kids. And like, I have a friend whose son is, I think, 14, and he's obsessed with Seinfeld. And when they got to my episode, oh my God, he freaked out. He could not believe I was like a whole new person to him. And it's my son, I have a 19-year-old son who finds the whole thing, my entire acting career, he just doesn't want to hear about it. But at some point, he's on a swim team, and I started getting texts from moms. Oh my God, I just saw your Seinfeld. I'm like, how? Well, it turned out that one of the boys on the swim team had discovered that his, you know, mom was on us, and he was passing it around to people. And it, you know, so it's kind of fun that it just keeps popping up in different generations of people who enjoy it. You know, it's taken on a whole new life.
And that episode, you know, what's so interesting about that episode is you're talking about 14 and 19-year-olds, like, and the phone message, right? It's the answer machine, something that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Right.
But it's
not
still,
only would they not know what the Cotton Dockers commercial was,
right.
but they wouldn't know what the idea of having a little tape that they were trying to steal, or, you know.
Yeah. And George leaving, I mean, him leaving that message, I still cannot laugh. Like, you know, take it easy, ball's in your court. And he knows he can't get that message back, right? Kids today, they can replay the message, you know, it's a whole different thing. So
I mean,
funny
the apple. Yeah, I remember being like 13, watching that live, and being like, "Oh yeah, if you call the girl, I need an apple." So it sound like I know what I'm doing on the other end. You sound relaxed.
Oh, that's fun. So you were like that age when you first saw it.
Yeah, live when it was coming out live, we were, you know, probably 12, 13, 14 years old. So and this is what we always say is George and Jerry. They even say they never grew up, right? They're always kids. They're children. They're not men. They're dealing with the same things that teenagers are dealing with, trying to call the girl. You know, got an enthusiastic high, and then when, you know, George calls Jerry a wuss, that's something, you know, teenage boys might do. Yeah, you're a wuss. You're not gonna, you know. So it's all there, and it's great to hear, you know, your son's into it now. I mean, we're hearing that a lot with guest stars.
He's not into it.
Well, okay, he will be soon. I mean, there's no
his friends are.
Yeah, to your point about the I Love Lucy stuff, I mean, that's what Seinfeld is to that to the whole new generation, right? And funnily enough,
comedy of that time.
Yeah, and funnily enough, Jerry says he never watched an episode of I Love Lucy in that episode.
That's right. That's funny.
Yeah.
So where does obviously, I mean, like we said, Modern Family, you name it. I mean, incredible resume. I know Seinfeld has a special place in your heart, obviously, but where do you kind of rank it as kind of
wow
appearances?
Well, it would definitely, I mean, definitely up there. Both in that, aside from the hair thing, it's one of the few shows I can watch and go, I was funny. That's good, because usually you're so critical of yourself as an actor. That the Modern Family was a really terrific experience. But yeah, I think the fact that it has become so iconic and so appreciated over the years, it is really held up. It definitely has made it a very special place in my acting career for me. Yeah. And it's something that other people always know and remember. Yeah.
I mean, what's great about that episode is that there were only 2 guest stars. So you really
that's right.
So prominent there. And the fear you put in George when he's trying to tell you the story and he's like, I gotta get out of here. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just great scenes. And then obviously Kramer coming in, the whole thing is just,
yeah. And had Kramer done all that sliding into the room stuff before is that established earlier? It must have.
He hadn't really done that yet by this point. Yeah. He had the hair going at this point pretty much, but not that slided. And he wasn't yet, like we mentioned, like he had his role, which was just kind of the neighbor coming in and kind of doing his thing. He did become, much of his, character is around saying, putting his foot in his mouth, saying whatever he wants, right? Just coming right out. So that fit right in with Cotton Dockers, one line. Great line by Jerry. I had to tell my friends. They didn't have to tell you. That's always a great line. I mean, this episode is littered with lines that we just use all the time.
I love that.
It's an instant classic. Like I said, we rank it number 1. You're a lot of that has to do with you're playing with Jerry on the couch, the snuggling, the tan pants. Why do I wear tan? I mean, it's just anything that just that we didn't ask, or that you can remember. Sort of, what is your kind of overall like takeaway from being on that set, and then sort of the fun times you probably had with Jerry and Larry and everyone?
I mean, I think I was really very fortunate to have been there at a time when it was evolving. It was and the fact that they weren't all really famous yet. They had just done a few things. I think Julia Louis-Dreyfus had been on Saturday Night Live for like a season. Jason Alexander had done Broadway. They weren't known actors yet. So there was definitely probably more of camaraderie on the set, because the pressure was not as high yet, But it was definitely a great experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, the pressure wasn't high, but you delivered. They all delivered.
Yeah.
I mean, I just seeing you now, just puts a smile on our face, because that episode it means so much. We rank it 1, and then the show really took off from there. But we can't thank you enough, Gretchen. This has been
thank you for having me.
We thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely.
And, we love Cotton Dockers.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. This was so much fun.
You have to go look up the Dockers commercials, and then you'll know what I mean.
Right. Hey, get your son watching. Let's go.
Yeah, let's get him on here. He's got to catch up here. But thank you so much, Gretchen. This was so much fun.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck with everything.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.